Very much. I have a problem. I'm under the weather. And so my voice is hoarse. I hope you could all hear me. So without wasting too much time on protocol, let me commend Arewa House for organizing this event and for inviting, being a Center for Historical Documentation and Research of the Ahmadu Bello University, a galaxy of academics, including my teacher at undergraduate level, Professor Ahmadu. All the rest are either my colleagues or my younger brothers, but in the audience is Professor Tukur Baba from the Asia, who was also my teacher. So when I was introduced as an elder, I said, when did I become an elder? And I whispered to the director of your house, I said, is applying my back. So let me commend Arewa House. Now, this is not the first time that Arewa House is organizing this kind of forum. I recall that in 1996 or so, 30 years ago, in the context of the transitional election to 1999, we had in this hall a colloquium, basically comparing the life and legacies of Ahmadu Bello with the life and legacies of Martin Luther King Jr. And it was supported partially by the American Embassy. But 30 years later, what have we done on the basis of what we did before? Virtually nothing. Then in 2006, to mark the 40th anniversary of the events of 1966, we had another colloquium in the auditorium, at the banquet hall of Arewa House. 20 years later, what have we done with the outcome of that colloquium? And in 2006, it was on the eve of the 2007 general election. But we are here in 2026, 20 years after 2006, and on the eve of another general election. So what have we done with the lessons of the past? I recall that Dr. Mahmood, who was the Director of Institute of Administration in Zaria and the first Vice Chancellor of Cairo University, warned us here in this hall that we should use the biographical approach in assessing the life and legacies of Sir Ahmadu Bello. But we should not degenerate into a hagiography instead of a biography. Because much of what you hear is that Sir Ahmadu Bello was a saint. He took no wrong steps. And therefore, all we need to do somewhere is to roll back time to his days and things will work out well. And when we talk about legacies, we fail to identify in concrete terms what these legacies are and how we can benefit from these legacies in terms of historical research. If the idea is to reflect on the life of Sir Ahmadu Bello, I'm not sure that we are fully equipped here, years after his, 60 years actually, after his death, to really talk about the legacy. But since we are part and parcel of an intellectual organization called Arewa House and the Ahmadu Bello University, I would like to say one or two things to justify what I'm saying. We are here, many of us distinguished professors, but who among us has written a book, good book, on Sir Ahmadu Bello? None. We had to wait for John Peden, an American, to write Sir Ahmadu Bello, which was launched in 1986. Since then, nothing. Nothing has been written about Sir Ahmadu Bello. Of course, there is his autobiography, My Life, but that was written in 1962 in his own lifetime. So we're not doing justice to Sardaunan's legacies because we're not approaching the matter as intellectually as we should. And I want to raise 3 issues requiring the attention of scholars. The first one is to say that Sir Ahmadu Bello was a politician. He belonged to a political party called the Northern People's Congress. How did they run the Northern People's Congress? Many here don't know that the original secretariat of the NPC was not located here in Kaduna. It wasn't in Lagos. It was actually in Zaria until the 1954 convention of the NPC that the secretariat was transferred to Kaduna. At that time, Kaduna was just a small village compared to Zaria. There was no bakery in Kaduna. They used to bring bread from Zaria. And people would line up on Kano Road. People would line up on Kano Road and be following the truck and shouting, bread, bread, bread. Kaduna was just a big village. So what have we done to enhance our understanding of the management of the platform that enabled the Sardaunan to be the premier of the northern region? After the coup of 1966, we have been told that party files were carted away by the military. It may be so for some of the parties, but certainly not for the Northern People's Congress. As a research student in 1989, 37 years ago, I came across 100 files of the NPC here in Arewa House. And I read each and every one of these 100 files. And they're still available here. Now, one of the lessons I learned from the records was the way they manage party finance. Because quite often you hear people say that members contributed to the running of political parties. Say the NPC had branches in Sierra Leone and Ghana. But what they were getting from members' contribution was insufficient to run the political party. The Sardaunan, Bello, and others were actually going around town borrowing money from institutions and individuals to run the Northern People's Congress. I encourage you, particularly our research students, to study the files in the NPC. It will make a fantastic research for a PhD thesis. And the records are here. Director, I think they're still here. But people are not looking at those files. Number two, the premier was premier by virtue of his membership of the Northern Regional House of Assembly. It was a parliamentary system. But I stand to be corrected. I haven't read any good book, or any book for that matter, written by anybody on the Northern Regional Legislature, the House of Chiefs and House of Assembly, of which Sir Ahmadu Bello was a member. That was what qualified him to become the premier of the Northern region. And here in Arewa House, you have virtually all the copies of the answer, the official records of Parliament. And in the National Archives, you have tons and tons of documents on the Northern Regional Legislature. Why are we not writing? In fact, while I was at INEC, I decided to do something about it, but because I had no time, I made copies. I have tons and tons of documents. God willing, I intend to do a book on the Northern Regional Legislature. The third point I would like to make is that we are given the impression as if Sir Ahmadu Bello ran the region on a platter. Because he was Sir Ahmadu Bello, because he was the grandson of the Shehu, things fell in place. That is not true. I have been told that he was a conservative. Sir Ahmadu Bello was very radical, very, very radical. And he fought the NA system to a standstill over the issues of probity and accountability. In 1960, after he became premier, he appointed a commission of inquiry led by the Maibede Umar Suleiman into the affairs of the Zulu Native Authority that led to the deposition of the emir of Zulu, Muhammad Sani. In 1961, he was disturbed by the management of the affairs of Zaria Native Authority under the emir Aminu. He set up the Muhammadu Kobo Commission of Inquiry, Muhammadu Kobo at the time of the emir of Lapai, to inquire into the financial management of Zaria Native Authority. What happened? In 1961, they projected a budget surplus of £181,000. But before the end of the financial year, they came to the regional government asking for a guarantee of bank loan to pay, among other commitments, the salaries of staff of Zaria NA. Sardaunan visited Zaria twice, and he gave the native authority under the emir the dressing down of their lives. And all these documents are available here in Ario House. Now, in 1962, he set up the W.D. Wilson Commission of Inquiry into the management of the affairs of the Gwandu Native Authority, even though his own cousin was the emir of Gwandu. In the cases of Zaria and Gwandu, the emirs were not deposed, but the native authorities were downgraded that any expenditure above £5 had to be authorized by the DOs, not the emirs. And we are all aware of what happened in 1963 when, following the Mahmood inquiry, the almighty emir of Kano, Ahmadu, was actually deposed. The Mahmood report is in Arewa House. The memo that went to the Northern Regional Executive Council, chaired by Makaman Bidda, not the Sardaunan himself, is also there for people to study, but we don't study. But we talk about the greatness of the Sardaunan. He was a great man in terms of economy, education, healthcare, public works. But we're not approaching the matter intellectually. What is it that we wish to learn beyond what we are told? So we need to go back to the drawing board as a people. Two things by way of conclusion and as a recommendation. Methodologically, it appears we have a big intellectual problem in understanding and appreciating Ahmadu. As young undergraduate students coming to Kaduna in the 1980s, who were fascinated by the tons and tons of fantastic master's and PhD theses produced mainly by intellectuals from the Ahmadu Bello University. And some of them are available in Arewa House, and some of them, thanks to the efforts of Arewa House, have been published under the Arewa House Studies series. But what has happened to us since then? You see some of the PhD theses produced from our universities, you cringe. A miserable 190 pages, they say it's a PhD in history. What aspect of history did they study? Nothing. And what happened to our intellectuals? Nothing, nothing. I was so influenced by Abubakar Ali. I never met him. He was director of the Institute of Administration. He submitted his thesis in 1970, I think, 70, over 50 years ago. It was a fantastic, fantastic PhD thesis, but not published. By arrangement with Arewa House, I volunteered to edit and publish the thesis as part of the Arewa House book series, which has been done. And in my foreword to the book, I said I did it out of labor of simple administration for the exceptional quality of the Arewa scholarship. We have that kind of thing today. Today, everybody has a PhD. I will see them put PhD after their names. But there's no scholarship. It's just qualification. We can do better. Finally, to be able to do these things, we need to tap on the experience of people who are much older and more experienced in academia than I am, to produce the kind of work that Ahmadu Bello University area was known for. How do you do it? One, we need to do something about methodology. But secondly, there has to be a mechanism for institutions to be able to do those kind of things. But since we are talking about the legacy of Ahmadu Bello, I will soon conclude. I will say that it is actually a shame that in the North today, there isn't in any university a chair endowed in the name of Ahmadu Bello or Joseph Taraka or Sakashim Ibrahim or Malam Aminu Kano. Not one single professorial chair. And if you have a professorial chair to which there are resources, you can elect some of the good hands, and there are professors all over, to serve for a period of 5 years. And during the 5-year period, some amount of money will be available for that professor to direct research. All these areas I've mentioned, that professor should be able to identify good postgraduate students and also bring in research fellows, some of them postgraduate fellows, to be able to do that kind of thing. How I wish we had more time, because Ahmadu Bello's life is not just a life of leadership on a platter. It was even at the point a life riddled with frustration. And let me end by reading a quote from a letter written by Sir Ahmadu Bello in 1942. It was a private correspondence. There was the Whirlwind Committee established for the Africanization of the colonial service. And Abubakar Imam, the late Abubakar Imam, was a member of that committee. So he wrote his fellow Katsina College graduates for contributions. And he wrote Sir Ahmadu Bello, who was in Guspo in 1942. And this is what the Sardaunan said. He told Abubakar Imam, he said, I doubt if we have the freedom to state facts as we saw them for fear of our conservative leaders. He says, such progressive ideas are discouraged, and especially coming from an enlightened person who is daily being spied upon for any failure that could lead to his retirement. As progress and development are not desirable qualities, one may even find oneself being posted to a distant rural station from where one's ideas will no longer be of any use to the community, unquote. And this letter is published in Abubakar Imam Memoirs, edited by Brahman Mura, published in Zaria in 1988, I believe. So I commend Ariel House for this initiative, but as intellectuals, my brothers and sisters, we have a lot of work to do. It is not enough for us to say that Ahmadu Bello built institutions. How did he? It's when you look at the records properly that you will now come up with the lessons from history that will guide those who may wish to emulate Ahmadu Bello. Will there be another Ahmadu Bello? No. But we are all in our own individual ways Ahmadu Bellos, as heads of families, as heads of departments in the universities, as vice chancellors, as school principals. Therefore, the Ahmadu Bello should continue to be born in us, rather than looking forward to a golden era where things work the way historiographically they did not work, but they could only have worked in our minds hagiographically. Thank you very much.